Right then, people, let's talk Arsenal. We need to talk about Arsenal because their season when it comes to trophies is hanging by a thread. At the same time, Twitter is wild right now. And the feeling around Arteta, I am amazed by it. Get involved in the comments. Talk to me. I want to talk to you guys about this. I want to talk about expected goals and the two sides of that. I want to talk about some facets that have probably led to Arsenal having the frustration they're having right now, and Arsenal fans as well. I want to talk about Arteta's squad, maybe go through the squad there and talk about the kind of hits and misses, and then talk about goals and creativity. Because what is quite clear to me is this: they are not scoring the goals that they should be scoring when they're dominating games like they have been. I was at the Newcastle game, and of course they've just played this game against Man United. The XG 3.87 to 0.33 against 10 men as well. The scores 1-1. The other night, Arsenal created 3.76 expected goals against Newcastle, but only 0.81 goals on target. It's a huge problem, but is it a problem that should be directed at the manager? I'm not totally sure yet, so let's explore this. As you know, guys, I am whimsical, so we're going to have a look through the squad and talk to me how let me know how you're feeling about Arteta and the season this year, because I think with Man City sort of falling away the way that they have, that's understandably incredibly frustrating for you. But is there something bigger at play? I've got to be honest. I mean, if I showed you that and you'd be like, forget the goal for a second. Obviously, you can see that it's 1-1. That is utter dominance, before the red card. And so that is something that, if you're just sort of winning games but not playing well, that's a concern. Now, are they playing well? That's a question in itself. I think they had 26 shots in this game. As I've just shown you, the XG incredibly high. But they're just unable to get past that final line at the moment. And that's a massive, massive thing. And why is that happening? I think it's two things. I think it's, and you're not going to want to hear this, a bit of luck is involved, but I also think that is leading to a lack of, it just feels very lethargic and stale at the game. And there's a lack of pace, ingenuity, creativity to this Arsenal team. And in terms of what Arteta's built and is trying to build, I think that's part of the problem. But what we'll say is, and again, this can be spun either way. I'm intrigued to know how you guys feel about this one. So this is Premier League points per match. Pep Guardiola, obviously in top spot, 2.31. And this is managers with over 100 games, I think. And Arteta's currently in 7th spot. And I think that's worth remembering, because I just think the memories here are really, really short. Like this idea, I've heard on a couple of things, and obviously it's people that's how they make their money, is by speaking that way. But they're saying that he's got to go tonight. We laugh about that on the podcast with Flav, Jaffam. We laugh about saying he's got to go tonight. He's not got to go tonight. Am I losing my mind here? His points per match is incredible with a team that has been very young and has continued to kind of grow and develop. Are you reaching the point where the dream of potential in some of these players, maybe you might be at the end of that? Maybe. And maybe the transfers, summer look, when you're looking at this summer, let's have a look at that. When you look at this summer's transfers, it doesn't look great. Like today, of course it doesn't, especially when you've pretty much gone out of the League Cup, unless you can turn it around, which of course you can absolutely do. And if you can win the Champions League, look, all's going to be rosy. But I think there's an understanding thought to be had where if you go, look, we were so close to winning the Premier League and we felt like we just needed a couple of other guys to get us over the line. The money that's spent here is pretty solid. 45 million euros for Calafiori. He's not played enough, but I think when he's played, you've generally sort of enjoyed him, and the depth there from a defensive point of view is there for all to see. I think even with a lot of injuries, you've been very, very solid defensively. Mikel Merino. I wasn't sure about this one at the time. I think the idea from Arteta here is that he's your sort of Gundogan in the sense that he can kind of sneak into the box and score goals. He's neat, he's tidy, but aside from that, is he going to dribble past 5 players? Absolutely not. Can he be a little bit cleverer than other players in the Premier League in a good team that's not got the injuries that they've had this year? Maybe. But again, 32 million, did feel like it was the closest one for me in terms of going, he had an all right tournament. I remember him from that, so let's get him in. It did feel a touch like that. I've got to be honest. Have to be honest on that one. David Raya is one that you kind of knew about already. So again, in terms of if that sort of general feeling that fans understandably have, which is like, spend all the money and get all the players and win all the games. Okay, you've not spent all the money. And I think there's a glaring omission here with the fact that you haven't gone and got that striker. And when we're looking at this whole XG thing, the other side of it, and this is the most interesting thing for me. So I've gone through the whole season here. So the highlighted games are the games where Arsenal have had the better XG. You know, the XG that they've got up against the expected goals against. They are generally incredibly dominant in most games that they're playing. So that speaks a couple of things to me. Like one, and there are, there's a couple of 5-1s in here. There's a couple of 4-0s in it, or 4-2, sorry. But in those last couple of games when it's mattered, the Newcastle game, if you switch that on its head, if Arsenal had won that one, the narrative would be, oh, Arsenal got away with it. Now it's better because you've won the game. I get that. But in terms of the long-term success of Arsenal, that's not really the way you want it to be. But instead, because it is Arsenal, it is a story when they aren't winning games because they have been so prolific. I think we've got to talk about the injuries here. There's been a lot of injuries. Like if we go through the team, now this is, I think, like the dream team, right? At the start of the season, he would have liked to have played this team for the bulk of the season, right? And I want to talk about something tactically that I think has been playing on my mind, which I touched on. I was on Saturday Social? Yeah, yesterday. We were talking about it, but you've only got so much time to really, really talk about it. And it just felt so glaring when I went to that game, the Arsenal-Newcastle game. But in terms of, the game that's just been played, there's a lot of players that are missing. Like Jorginho played in this one, obviously. Havertz played. Saka. I mean, how big of a loss is that? It's enormous. Jesus, we know, is not him. Timber, good, solid player. Ben White is a big miss. He is a big miss. I can't remember who the left back was now. Lewis Skelly, of course it was. Lewis Skelly's, youngster coming in, and all of a sudden this team looks very, very different. Very, very different. Pretty sure Rice didn't play, didn't he? Marino obviously played. So all of a sudden this looks very, very different. And so when coming back, the thing I will say is that there is a discussion to be had about the squad building in terms of like, to get you over the line, are some of these players going to get you to where you want to be? I feel like with this team, Odegaard's struggling at the moment. I think he's really, really missing this sort of triangle that he had with Saka. I also think, we'll get to, because I think, yes, Jesus will kind of make those runs at different times, but overall there's just not that same fluency between these guys. From an attacking point of view, I don't think Timber's as good as Ben White. And it means that this back line, I feel like the back line for opponents, they often know what's coming. There might be the odd kind of flick in or bit of movement every so often, but overall, if you can be strong and deal with the crosses when they come in, really, it's so sort of stagnant and stale at times that you give yourself a chance, and that's why Arsenal aren't scoring goals in open play at the moment. Havertz is he's just never ever going to be. And we thought at the start of the season maybe he would go and be that striker, but he's just not going to be it. Like year after year, his expected goals, he doesn't he doesn't exceed what he's creating. He's miles off it every single season. And that is, if you do want to go and win the league, which of course they do, and maybe you do, maybe you do get annoyed about that. Maybe you do say, why are we buying Havertz and Jesus and Sterling and Jorginho? Why are we buying these, Zinchenko? Why are we buying these players that weren't good enough for other top sides? But it's all of these things. The XGs are catch-22. You're creating it, but you're not scoring it. Would you not want to be creating it, but just scoring some goals? probably overall, but those are cracks that will, in the end, catch you out. You're actually better off being the other way around. The personnel's got to be better, though. It's got to be improved. And I think when I'm thinking about that back line, as I've just said, I just feel like they're not affected enough by the players. So in that video that I was talking about, I think like he is so brilliant at moving the team up the pitch and then actually keeping them in there as well. And Saliba and Gabriel, you do have a world-class centre-back pairing there. Raya absolutely suits this team. He's fantastic. Odegaard is a brilliant player, but I think he's needing a bit more around him when it comes to movement. And I think there's two kinds of players in football a lot of the time. There's players that want to defeat, and there's players that want to get on that half turn and spin and make that run, and are willing to make that run. And then there's some players that actually just stand still and see it and see passes before you can. And I actually think all three are missing a little bit. I think there's an over-reliance on Odegaard to be that guy who can see the pass and create. I think the runs from the others aren't kind of good enough. And that out and out, that finishing mentality. I was talking to Robbie about it yesterday, and I was saying that, like, you know, like, say when you're doing like a fighting game, an old school fighting game, you'd have like a bar, and your bar would be full, okay? And if it gets down to a certain level, then you're knocked out, you've lost the game, okay? Street Fighter, your vibes, right? I think with quality strikers, their confidence never, ever drops, regardless of what's going on. It never drops lower than that. It's always that full. It will never drop lower than that. What I'm seeing with Havertz and what we've seen with Jesus and we see with Martinelli is they're generally here. Their confidence is not high enough. The chances that we're seeing Havertz miss at the moment. Whereas Saka's always up here, because he knows how good he is. And I think when you're going to win the league, you need players like that playing. Look at Liverpool. Got Salah there, ready to score goals. JaackMaate at the moment in that team is up in this upper echelon of it in terms of that confidence level. This Arsenal team in the final, areas of the pitch, I think they're lacking a little bit of freedom. But like, you can't just give them. You just go and be free. If you go and do that, then you're coming into this sort of Harry Redknapp idea, which is not the wrong idea. It's actually one that Pep Guardiola has had as well, which is, I'll get you to the final third, and then it's up to you. And I don't think Pep Guardiola has ever gone too far away from that, aside from like the initial positions within all of that. I think Arteta is far more prescriptive in what he wants from his team, and that is why they're still dominating that XG. But to get to that next level, to be able to win when you're not playing great, you need those cheat codes. Saka is that cheat code. Martinelli has not been a cheat code for a long time. Odegaard, I think, can be. And then the overall kind of floor of the team, in terms of a technical point of view, I think is overall is pretty strong. It is pretty strong. But if we look at the squad, there's some really, really, really good players. But who's just going to get you out of a bind? The other thing I would throw at Arteta here is, in terms of goals and creativity, Fabio Vieira not being a part of this squad when you've gone and bought him for a lot of money, Emil Smith-Rowe being allowed to leave when you know how talented he is. In a long season, it's not just about the starters. It's about that second layer of players. And that second layer of players has got to be better. Like, I think Raheem Sterling will be really disappointed with the impact that he's had so far. But for a loan signing, I still don't think that was a bad decision. Like, I don't know the financial side of it, but you would imagine that Arsenal still have some money knocking about. But also at the same time, they have spent a juicy amount. But this team is not going anywhere. Let's turn it into a list for you. Is that a better look? No, let's go back. But like, out of this team, when you need those other guys to step in, Ethan Nwaneri actually should have 20 more games by now, I would say. When you look at that forward line, in terms of that central striker, there's so little there really for you to use. What are you expecting? And your main guy, we're still not sure if that's actually his position. It seems to be it now, but maybe the truth is that is his position, but he is not at that outrageous level that is going to allow you to just get away with some games or win games when you're not playing brilliantly, or you just need that little spark to get you out of jail. We all know those players, and I think that's something that Arsenal haven't had, especially when Saka's not on the pitch. And they are still creating that XG with the size that they've got and the crosses that they put in. But the next phase for Arteta, and I do think it's 3 players away. Maybe even it's just that one striker. You put Isak in that team, or Gyökeres in that team, I think you unlock a lot, hell of a lot. And on my video yesterday, I was talking about Brahim Diaz. I would really love to see Brahim Diaz in this team, because it would take the sort of vision burden off Martin Odegaard. Because again, party, steady, strong, solid, a leader, all that stuff. So, this team's not going to kind of wholeheartedly fall away. They've got a lot of proper captains and men in there, haven't they? But that little stardust, it's Odegaard, Nwaneri, but he needs to be playing more games. And defensively, I think they're actually incredibly strong. Incredibly strong. I don't see a real problem there. But every team's going to have those issues. And so when you have those issues, there's 2 ways of dealing with it. It's like concede less or score so much more. You've got to be able to overpower the opposition. I think the only way that Arsenal can overpower the opposition right now, it feels like, is by being really good and functional and waiting for that mistake. But I think the opposition have kind of cottoned onto that. And so they're seeing the sort of offensive patterns and they're able to kind of cope with it. And when you put it in the air with those crosses, you leave it in the air, So there's going to be some games that you should have won. But did you wholeheartedly deserve them? No, because you don't seem to be able to score in open play or score enough in open play. That, and then like the bulk of that first team squad this year has had injuries. So I think that's a big factor here as well. I think they're a couple of players away. I think Arteta, I think this time next year, if you're not seeing a team that's a bit more free-flowing, and remember, we have seen them a bit more free-flowing. They were so great, but that was when their chemistry was at its height and they weren't having those injuries. At the moment, he hasn't got those players that he needs. He probably needs to have a bit more of a hit rate, and that second layer has got to be better to allow him to kind of provide that freedom to the team. Yeah, it's confusing times. But I mean, if you're thinking that Arteta should go, I'm absolutely blown away by that. But I'm here, I'm listening, I'm reading. Get in the comments, let me know. If you enjoyed this video, check out some of the other videos. When it's those hot talking points, we'll talk about them. And this is a place for me to do that. So make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you soon.